of the House.
Order, order. Order. Now, order. I do ask the House to settle down. May I say to honourable members, there's a great pressure to participate in this debate. Interventions take up time and will jeopardise those who wish to be called. The Prime Minister.
It is interesting, after all they have had to say in recent days, that they are so disinclined to listen to what is happening. I have offered the House, Mr. Speaker, 5 pledges about our plans. In return, we would settle today for the answer to just 2 questions about Labour's own proposals and Labour's document. It says in their document, and I quote, "These changes, that is their fair rents proposals, these changes will mean that 7 out of 10 families will gain." That is a direct quote. It is said that is shown by independent research. Again, a direct quote. I am very pleased to hear it. It is wise to consult and have such research. The honourable gentleman is right to have done it. But if he has done it, then the right honourable gentleman must have the calculations to back up what has been said. And if he has them, why hasn't he shared them with the House? Will he publish them? If the right honourable gentleman's plans are in such a state of grace, will he lay those calculations in the library so we can all examine them? Now, surely the independent researchers will have actually given them to the Labour Party, having carried them out. So where is this document? How many of his honourable friends has actually seen this document?
One put his hand up.
Hands up, those who've seen it. Hands up. Hands up. Hands up, those who've seen it.
No more now from the Labour side.
Well. Now, Mr. Speaker, that's extremely interesting. None of them have seen it. Not even the honourable gentleman for Dagenham, who told us about it, has seen it.
Brian Gould.
Now, I wouldn't think for a moment, Mr. Speaker, that the honourable gentleman for Dagenham would mislead anyone. So I ask him in a perfectly straightforward fashion, in order to put everyone's doubts at rest, will he this afternoon put that document in the House of Commons library?
A lot of questions from each side in this debate.
I give way.
Brian Gould stays in his seat.
Well.
Order. Order. Let us get on. Order. Let's get on with the debate. The Prime Minister.
Well, silence is not only golden, it's instructive, isn't it? So the second question, Mr. Speaker, to which every taxpayer is entitled to an answer, is how will the Labour Party stop local tax bills soaring? We have said perfectly clearly that we will cap spendthrift councils. The opposition have said they will not cap spendthrift councils. So how will they keep the bills down? Will they make business pick up the bills? Or will they just let their fare rates rip? And if so, how will they possibly be fair for the taxpayer? Well, taxpayers can be reassured, because the honourable gentleman for Dagenham has come galloping to the rescue today. He has told the New Statesman that he has an answer. He knows how he's going to stop all these overspending local councils. He's told them, it's perfectly clear, this is what he said. It's very, very firm. We will certainly do all we can to encourage councils to behave sensibly.
Loud laughter from Conservative benches now.
Order. The Prime Minister.
So there it is. There's the smack of firm opposition. Mr. Speaker, this House is entitled.
Labour MP David Blunkett's trying to intervene. One of their front bench speakers.
No, the Prime Minister has indicated that he's not giving way.
They really don't like it when they're on the receiving end, do they? Mr. Speaker, this House is entitled to ask why so many Labour councils deliberately choose to set community charge bills that are far higher than they need to be. And the answer is because those councils resist any measure to reduce local spending overall. They put political priorities before local needs. They put the interests of the providers before those of the public. The Audit Commission's report, they ignore it. Cost savings suggested, they reject them. New ideas proposed, they don't even begin to understand them. Now, part of our reforms must have been to make councils like that truly accountable, and we will do so. In a moment, I will give way to the honourable gentleman. But it is the behaviour of Labour council after Labour council that has brought the finance of local government into disrepute. Across the country, the story has been the same. Money wasted, services neglected, the concerns of local people ignored. And which, Mr. Speaker, are the councils who have the largest number of empty properties? Labour councils. Which councils don't collect arrears to fund the rate fund? Labour councils. Which councils produce the worst education system? Labour councils. But there are some things I want to be strictly fair in a moment. I want to be strictly fair to the Labour Party. There are some things that they do better and they do more of. More town twinning, more foreign visits by local councillors, more nuclear-free zones, more campaigns on international causes that lie well beyond the interests of local councils. So they had one policy on local government, to force costs higher. And over the last few years, too many people have come to know in this country, too sadly, through rates and the community charge, the high and bitter cost of living under Labour councils. I give way.
Dale Campbell-Savers now, Labour MP.
If the Prime Minister is so concerned about the waste of public monies, why did he and the Secretary of State sit back for weeks fiddling their thumbs whilst local authorities, spent tens of millions of pounds sending out bills which were totally invalid? Wasn't that the biggest squandering of public money known?
If it indeed were the biggest squandering of money, then many community charge payers would be very happy, for far more has been lost by Labour councils and their activities. So the fundamental problem, I have given way sufficiently. So the fundamental problem, Mr. Speaker, remains. Labour councils spend too much. And that is why, in this budget, we have made a fundamental shift from local to central tax. And that is why we will reform the system to stop the burden ever being felt again. The party opposite opposed us at every step. And now they challenge us today. Not just the high spenders sitting on the bench opposite, but the non-spenders sitting on the bench opposite as well. The right honourable gentleman is concerned about the damage allegedly done to this country by the community charge. What about the damage done to this country by the honourable gentleman sitting over there who incite others to break the law and not pay their taxes? The right honourable gentleman censures this government. Yet the right honourable gentleman does not have the courage to take action against those who sit behind him as Labour MPs inciting others to break the law. They have no plans. They have no plans to keep local tax bills down. And those bills would rise further yet because they have no plans to keep inflation down either. We are winning the battle against inflation. The opposition, I draw a distinction. The Labour opposition have fought us at every step. Every time we've had to take a hard decision, they have gone for a soft option. Every interest rate increase has been opposed. Every cut has been derided as not enough. The opposition's standard incantation has been Monkland's law. Whatever the prevailing rate of interest, call for a 1% cut.
Reference there to John Smith.
That call would have been better employed calling for cuts in wasteful and unnecessary spending by local Labour councils. Mr. Speaker, the budget strategy is central to our aims for local government, not only in the switch from local to central taxation, but also in our determination to get inflation down and keep it down. That is as important for local government and local government taxpayers as it is for central government. Inflation has now been falling for 4 successive months. The next 6 months, wait and see and you'll see the relevance. The next 6 months will see dramatic reductions. Indeed, I expect a sharp drop in the inflation rate within 2 months. This will greatly help to ease in the new system of local government finance that we have in mind. By the end of this year, inflation will be down to 4%, and it will go on falling into 1992. And if we are to move successfully from the community charge to the new system of local government finance, then low inflation is essential. It is now well on the way to being achieved. Mr. Speaker, no, I'm not going to give way to the honourable lady. Mr. Speaker, our inflation rate will be half its current level by December. And that lower inflation is the route to lower interest rates, lower bills for local taxpayers, and a fairer system that we shall introduce for local government finance. We have had 4 days' debate on my right honourable friend's budget, a substantial part of which was devoted to the reduction in community charge bills. And as is proper, we have debated that fully. We are now entitled to just a few answers from the party opposite about their shadow budget and its impact on local taxation. They say they support the switch from local to central taxation, but the right honourable gentleman, the leader of the opposition, leapt to criticise the increase in VAT. Maybe they would fund the switch out of VAT, maybe they wouldn't. Perhaps they have in mind raising income tax. In successive elections, Labour have pledged themselves to raise the basic rate of income tax. They want higher taxes, only these days they haven't the courage to admit how much higher they will need to fund their own local government plans. And local government finance is not the only place where Labour's numbers don't add up. Their child benefit figures, as we saw, only add up if they claw back from the poorest in the land the money that they would give to others, whatever their incomes may be. Those on income support and family credit can expect no comfort from the Labour Party. And yet, Mr. Speaker, those are the very families we've helped with £350 million a year extra in each of the last 3 years. The question arises, did Labour intend to hurt the poorest, or was it incompetence that made them hurt the poorest? Then, Mr. Speaker, can the right honourable gentleman tell us in the shadow budget what has happened to their top commitment pensioners? They vanished completely from the shadow budget. A very shifty position indeed. Mr. Speaker, this and other matters.
Point of order from Labour MP George Howarth.
The point of order is very simple. At the beginning of this debate, you pointed out that the motion on the order paper was quite narrow and related specifically to the poll tax. The Prime Minister has strayed well away from that subject.
Well, order. I have not heard anything out of order yet. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we don't even have to guess what a Labour government would be like. We can see Labour in action in local government every day of the week. They've brought shame on the very name of local government. They have overtaxed and overspent on a scale that shows their unfitness to manage our national budget. They have left waste and chaos in their wake. No one for a single moment could believe that a party that has failed and failed again at local level could even begin to form a government when they can't even clear the rubbish properly at local level. It's over there, Mr. Speaker, on the benches opposite, that the motion of no confidence should be directed. No confidence in a party that will always be divided when it comes to standing up for Britain. No confidence in a party that could never accept the responsibilities that go with government. This House can have that confidence in this party today, tomorrow, and for many years to come.
Oh, loud cheers, good reception for Mr. Major for that performance. One of the best he's received. Strong counter-attack on Labour local councils after Mr. Kinnock's own speech, which had gone down well with his side. Now, the Liberal Democrat leader, Paddy Ashdown. Many MPs now leaving the chamber to assess the respective performances of the two party leaders.
Well, honourable members, please, if they are not remaining, leave quietly. Order. The honourable member, wait one moment. Right honourable member, wait a moment.
House is now settling down again after those two major speeches.
Will honourable members resume their seats, please? Mr. Paddy Ashdown.
Now Paddy Ashdown.
Mr. Speaker, anybody watching this House on television or elsewhere in the last hour and a few minutes would, I think, have been pretty depressed at the two speeches that we have just heard. Both of them...
Yours have been brilliant.
Both of them, Mr. Speaker, concentrating for 80–90% of their time on excoriating the opposition instead of elucidating their own policy. Any poll taxpayer watching this debate or reading it so far who expects to receive information about the effects of either of the two major parties' policies will have been sadly disappointed. I am bound to say that I don't believe that we have had anything but the very worst example of what is wrong with this House these last hour and a bit. Mr. Speaker,
If you don't like it, leave it.
Mr. Speaker, in the Well, it's about time, goody two-shoes, some it's about time this House started to speak for the people of Britain. Instead of speaking for the narrow sectional party interests, as we have heard so clearly demonstrated. I would have thought, Mr. Speaker, that this was an opportunity for the Prime Minister, who I must say broke with what I have regarded to be a strength of his, in what I think was a speech dedicated to not revealing his own party policies or laying out its implications, but to a long and almost interminable attack on the opposition in order to prevent him, in order to avoid the necessity to explain his own policy. And I'm bound to say that the Leader of the Opposition did exactly the same. Now, Mr. Speaker, there's a vote of no confidence in the government tonight, and we will vote, obviously, in favour of that motion, expressing no confidence in the government. We will vote in favour, Mr. Speaker, of that motion of no confidence in the government. For it is obviously impossible to have confidence in a government which has presided over such a shambles as the poll tax. But, Mr. Speaker, the lessons of this miserable fiasco go much wider. They do not just touch on the fact that the poll tax has uncovered the failure of a Conservative government after 12 years in power. We also see that we have had the failure of the official opposition. So clearly example today and in all this sad and sorry tale. But, Mr. Speaker, more than that, the whole of the poll tax fiasco uncovers the way this House of Commons has failed in its duties towards the British citizen. And if I may say so, it has shown one other thing more clearly than anything else. And that is not just the failure of the government, the failure of the opposition, and I'm bound to say the failure of the House, but the failure of the political system that allowed this to happen in the first place. Now, Mr. Speaker, I wonder what the ordinary person, the poll taxpayer, observing this debate and observing the last 4 years, would actually say about the way that we have conducted ourselves in this matter. Let me deal with the government first. This is clearly the biggest political blunder made in this half of this century. I heard someone say the other day that the groundnuts scheme may have been worse, but frankly, to coin a phrase, that was peanuts in comparison to what we have just seen. Mr. Speaker, it isn't that we didn't know this was happening. We knew precisely what was going to be happening, because it was evident to all and the government were warned of it. But because of the arrogance that they had assumed in 12 long years in power, they simply were not prepared to listen. I will give way to the honourable gentleman in just a moment. They simply were not prepared to listen. They weren't prepared to listen to the repeated warnings that they had received from their own benches, from their own supporters in local government, from all the experts. They were going to ram this through whatever. At the end of the day, of course, they were made to listen. They were made to listen by the people of Ribble Valley. Finally, combining and voting for the Liberal Democrats in the ballot box. That's what killed the poll tax. And let it be noted, Mr. Speaker, that in that single night, the people of Ribble Valley did what the Labour Party has failed to do over 4 years. It was they who killed off the poll tax. And let it also be noted, because I hear the honourable member for Bolsover saying that it's the people who didn't pay, who killed the poll tax. What nonsense. This was killed through the ballot box, just as we said it would be. It was killed by the people of Ribble Valley. It was not killed by those who disobeyed the law or by those who encouraged the disobeyment of the law. It was not killed by the riots in Trafalgar Square. It was not killed by the non-payers. It was killed by people voting in the ballot box. Mr. Deputy Speaker, that is at least as it should be. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
Tony Marlow,
grateful to the
Conservative.
gentleman for giving way, and I'm very reluctant to intervene in this way. But the right honourable gentleman did start his speech by condemning both front benches for what he described as party political speeches. Now, I would hate to say it, but it does seem just a teensy-weensy little bit at the moment as he's making a highly party political speech. Perhaps he could change the style of his speech and go back towards consensus politics, and there was all respect in it.
Gentlemen, stick around. He will find in my speech that we will explain precisely. I will explain precisely what we would put in place of the poll tax. But let me return for a moment to the government's role in this. This has been removed from the statute book, the poll tax, by the people of Ribble Valley. But what a waste! What a waste! Mr. Speaker, I don't follow the Leader of the Opposition's slightly way-out figures on what has been spent on the poll tax because I don't frankly think they add up. But if you take the most conservative estimate about what the administration has cost, about what set-up charges have been, about the non-payment level, that comes out to £4 billion. That is the waste that this government has now instituted by pursuing this policy over the last 4 or 5 years. £4 billion. That's something like £120 for every single family in our country. It is twice the cost of the Gulf War that we have thrown away on the poll tax. Mr. Speaker, £4 billion. What could this nation do with £4 billion in education? What could it do to improve the health service? What could it do to solve the scourge of homelessness in our country? What could it do to solve the problems of poverty in our nation? But that is the amount of money that this government has now wantonly squandered on a policy which it knew perfectly well would not succeed and which it was warned would bring the evident miseries that it has brought about. And now, Mr. Speaker, in order to solve the problem, they are telling us that they will put 2.5% on the VAT. We'll never let this government say that it is the tax-cutting government ever again, because in a single stroke they have raised that tax by a full 16%. And, Mr. Speaker, what is now absolutely clear is that this government will not spend money on building Britain's future, but they will spend any money on bailing themselves out of the hole in which they have dug themselves, because that's what's now happened. The government has dug itself a hole, and it is now in the process of filling it in, but it is filling it in with our money. That is what.
Paddy Ashdown, the Liberal Democrat leader. And that's the end of our live coverage for today. The vote will come at 10 o'clock tonight, and there'll be a full review of the no confidence debate in Westminster tomorrow morning. And tomorrow the House breaks up for the Easter recess after a session which began with the House united over the Gulf War and which is ending with domestic politics dominant again, the poll tax to be scrapped and a House divided. Today we've seen the opposition and the government in confrontation.
They have done terrible wrongs to this country with their poll tax. By their refusal to right those wrongs, they have destroyed any claims they may have had to confidence or to trust. We have no confidence in Her Majesty's government. If they want to consult the British people, they should do it through the ballot box, straight away.
It's over there, Mr. Speaker, on the benches opposite, that the motion of no confidence should be directed. No confidence in a party that will always be divided when it comes to standing up for Britain. No confidence in a party that could never accept the responsibilities that go with government. This House can have that confidence in this party today, tomorrow, and for many years to come.
Tomorrow afternoon, following the 3 o'clock news, the Right Honourable Bernard Weatherall talks about his job as Speaker of the House of Commons. If you are looking forward to seeing Pamela Stevenson's choice of clips from the BBC archives this afternoon, it'll now be shown on Monday the 15th of April, but MP Paul Boateng will be along tomorrow at 4:30 with his favourite clips. And before that, at 4 o'clock, Robert Robinson will be along with Call My Bluff, which we were unable to show you today.
The master computer syndrome would bring us this close to a police state.
A question of conscience for the greater good.
Close the door backfires.
It's too late for U-turns now, Julian.
Have you ever leaked anything?
Well, no, there are leaks and there are leaks.
Your first loyalty is to your department.
I don't want there to be nothing done about this. Just talking to you could cost me my job.
Gillian, governments have been behaving thus since the year dot. Why should this one be pilloried?
Because I found out.
Conflicts of interest in the corridors of power for the greater good, tonight at 10 on 2. In
a couple of minutes, we've another holiday outing as we go camping in France. First on BBC2, here's Lynette Lithgow with the news. It's 5 o'clock.
MPs are debating a Labour motion of no confidence in the government. The Labour leader Neil Kinnock said the government was divided on what should be done about the poll tax, and he claimed the people of Britain were suffering as a result.
All over the country, people are worried to distraction about how they cope with their poll tax bills. Even a lot of his honourable friends, to do them credit, can actually see that. Frankly, Mr. Speaker, the only way to relieve that anxiety is to do the sensible thing. He should scrap the poll tax now.
If we had not offered consultation, we would have been rightly and bitterly criticised, not least by honourable gentlemen officer. So we will listen, we will take advice, and we will consider. And we will do it in that order, and then we will decide what we are finally going to do.
The National Executive Committee of the Labour Party has voted to suspend 13 members of the ruling Labour group on Lambeth Council in South London. It's also suspended 2 members of the Anti-Poll Tax Federation. The suspension of the councillors follows an investigation into their activities after a meeting at which they condemned Britain's action in the Gulf War. The Court of Appeal has been giving its reasons for freeing the Birmingham Six. They were released 2 weeks ago after serving more than 16 years in custody.
The men were released just a few minutes ago and said nothing as they left the court. They said that, the men were not released, the men walked free a few minutes ago. Lynette, let me start that again for you. The 4 of the 6 men were in court and they left just a few minutes ago. They heard the judges say that in the light of the fresh scientific evidence, which at least throws grave doubt on Dr. Scuse's evidence, although if it doesn't destroy it altogether, these convictions are both unsafe and unsatisfactory. Adding the scientific evidence, the judges said that adding the scientific evidence to the police evidence, the judges said that the convictions were so unsafe and unsatisfactory that they should be overturned. Now back to the studio.
Joshua, thank you. Reports from northern Iraq say Kurdish rebels are advancing on Mosul, the country's 3rd largest city. The rebels claim control over most of the region and say the collapse of Mosul would give them supremacy over the whole area. Foreign workers escaping the fighting have confirmed the rebels' claims. Some Kurds are calling for talks to establish a provisional government. The Soviet authorities say thousands of troops and riot police are being deployed in Moscow to prevent tomorrow's rally in support of the Russian leader Boris Yeltsin. There have already been demonstrations against the ban on the rally, which has been planned to coincide with an attack on Mr. Yeltsin by hardliners in the Russian parliament. That's all for now. The next news is the 6 o'clock news on BBC1.
In 10 minutes, Horizon examines how modern technology is being used to measure the tallest mountain in the world, Mount Everest. First on BBC2, we go camping in France in another holiday outing. For further information, please write to Holiday Outings, BBC Television Centre, Wood Lane, London W12 7RJ. Please enclose a stamped addressed envelope. In 50 minutes, the Starship Enterprise enters the neutral zone in Star Trek The Next Generation. Now on BBC2, we discover how aerial cartographers have been taking their best shots of Mount Everest in Horizon.